Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely change how you use your camera. We're going to ditch the guesswork and finally master your exposure using pro tools that are already built right into your gear. If you've just been crossing your fingers on auto mode, well, get ready because we are about to unlock a whole new level of creative control. So let's just dive right into a super frustrating problem. Have you ever wondered why your ridiculously expensive digital camera still manages to take, well, kind of terrible, poorly exposed photos? You know the feeling, right? You're out in this beautiful snow, and instead of brilliant, crisp white, the shot just looks dull and gray. Well, here's the crazy truth. It's actually not your fault your snow photos look like that. It is absolutely the camera's fault. So here's our roadmap for This Explainer. First up, why cameras get it wrong. Second, overriding the system. Third, reading the histogram. Fourth, protecting your highlights. And finally, unlocking some seriously cool hidden pro features.
All right, Section 1. Why cameras get it wrong. The man versus machine battle. Let's look at the fundamental reason why your incredibly advanced, super smart digital camera sometimes acts like a totally clueless machine when it tries to measure light.
Here's the absolute most crucial point. Your camera's internal light meter does not see the world the way your eyes do. It's actually hard-coded to force literally everything it looks at into this incredibly mediocre, boring middle ground called 18% gray. Basically, to your camera's brain, the entire world should just average out to exactly this one gray tone. And this really perfectly illustrates the problem we're up against. Whether you're shooting a brilliantly white scene or a super dark scene, your camera is just desperately trying to drag that exposure right back to dull gray. It will artificially underexpose pure white snow just to make it gray, and it'll overexpose a pure black dog, you guessed it, to make it gray. It's this constant tug-of-war battle between what's actually in front of you and what the machine desperately wants to see. Moving on to Section 2. Exposure compensation versus ISO. Overriding the machine. Now that we know exactly why the camera messes up, let's figure out how to fight back. We'll do this by clearing up the confusion between two really critical settings.
I absolutely love this analogy I found from a user on Reddit, breaking down the whole complex economy of exposure into literally just pocket change. It goes like this. Think of your ideal exposure as a dollar. Your shutter speed, aperture, and ISO are just the specific coins, the dimes and nickels you use to add up to that dollar. But exposure compensation? That changes the total price entirely. It lets you decide, hey, I actually want this picture to cost 90 cents, or maybe $1.10. Visually separating these two functions is a total game changer. While ISO just changes the sensitivity of your sensor, basically acting as the quarters you use to reach the camera's default $1 goal, exposure compensation is you stepping in and demanding a brand new goal entirely. You're literally telling the camera, look, I know better than your light meter. I need you to assume the world is actually darker or lighter than you think it is. So here are the exact real-world scenarios where you absolutely have to use exposure compensation to stop the camera from making everything 18% gray. For snow, bright beiges, or say a bird flying against a super bright sky, you need to dial in positive exposure compensation to keep those whites crisp and bright. On the flip side, for low-key moody shots or night scenes, you dial in negative compensation. That way the camera doesn't completely ruin your rich, deep shadows by trying to artificially brighten up. All right, Section 3, reading the histogram, the ultimate cheat code. Let's move to our next tool. Seriously, once you grasp this one, you are never going to look at your camera screen the same way again. Here is a hard truth. Your LCD preview screen lies to you. It really does. If you're standing outside in glaring sunlight, the screen looks super dark. If you're shooting in pitch black at night, it looks blindingly bright. But the histogram is the absolute, undeniable truth of your exposure. It plots out exactly how much data exists at every single brightness level, period. And the best part is, reading this graph is incredibly simple. Pushing your camera's exposure settings so the data piles up on the left side, that brings out the darks and the true blacks. Keeping all that data clumped in the middle gives you those average grays. And pushing the data over to the right side, that's what highlights your brights and pure whites. Which leads us perfectly to a really powerful pro technique. A ton of top-tier wildlife and landscape photographers use this thing called exposing to the right, or ETTR. By intentionally capturing a physically brighter image, they're grabbing the maximum possible signal-to-noise ratio. Basically, it gives them the cleanest, highest quality raw file imaginable to work with later on when they're editing. Okay, Section 4, protecting the highlights, beware the invisible wall. Because while pushing that data to the right is a fantastic strategy, we absolutely have to avoid hitting the absolute limit at all costs.
This is where you run into that invisible right wall of your histogram, otherwise known as highlight clipping. Just remember this rule. Light is data. And once your light data slams into that right wall and spikes into pure white, it is gone forever. No amount of dragging exposure sliders in Lightroom or Photoshop can save detail that your sensor literally never recorded. Once it's clipped, it's clipped. Luckily, to prevent this exact nightmare, we can practically automate our exposure using Zebra Stripes. Just follow these exact steps. First, dig into your menus and turn on Zebra Display. But, and this is super key, make sure you set the threshold to the absolute maximum, usually 100% or 255. Then, while you're shooting, simply dial your exposure down while looking through the viewfinder until those weird moving stripes completely vanish from your bright clouds or snow. Boom. You instantly have the absolute perfect exposure. Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Hidden Pro Camera Features, unlocking the remaining 80%. For our last section, we're going to dive deep into those complicated menus and unlock the remaining 80% of the camera features you paid good money for, but are probably totally ignoring. Let's start with a totally panic-inducing scenario. Have you ever thought your autofocus was completely broken because everything looked soft and blurry in the viewfinder, but then, miraculously, it looked razor sharp when you finally loaded it onto your computer? Well, before you drop hundreds of dollars repairing an expensive lens, your own eyes might actually be the ones lying to you. Fixing this takes, no joke, exactly 10 seconds. You see that tiny little jagged dial right next to your eye cup? That's the diopter. It calibrates the viewfinder to your specific eyesight prescription. So just look at a blank wall or leave the lens cap on and spin that little dial until the digital text overlay inside the viewfinder is razor sharp. Just like that, your camera is perfectly tuned to your own eyes. Another absolute hidden gem buried in your menus is focus peaking. This tool makes manual focusing incredibly fast by practically painting a brightly colored outline over whatever is currently in focus. It's actually an amazing way to use those super cheap, character-filled vintage lenses on your modern digital body. Just remember one crucial tip here. Keep the peaking sensitivity on low or standard. If you use the high setting, it's honestly a bit too forgiving and might leave you with slightly soft photos. Now imagine a bald eagle suddenly flies right past your slow, methodical landscape shoot. That's where the custom modes on your dial come in. They act as immediate panic switches to instantly recall your perfect settings. You can program C1 to instantly freeze fast action, set C2 for a beautiful shallow depth of field portrait, and use C3 as a total reset button to wipe the slate clean if you ever get horribly lost while tweaking your manual settings. Finally, you've got to protect your art. By setting up this really simple copyright tool just one single time in your setup menu, your name gets permanently attached to the metadata of every single RAW file you shoot. It's a true set it and forget it feature that literally every photographer should be using. Though, just as a quick heads up, social media sites do tend to strip this data out when you post, but it's still absolutely worth doing for your original files. As we wrap this up, I really want you to remember this one thing. You paid for 100% of your camera, so stop letting it make 18% grade decisions for you. By understanding the light meter, reading the histogram instead of trusting the LCD screen, and actually using these hidden pro features, you completely transform your camera. It stops being an average decision maker and becomes a ridiculously powerful precision tool. The power to capture those truly breathtaking, perfectly exposed images is literally right there in your hands, just waiting to be unleashed. So my final question to you is this. Are you ready to take back control, bravely turn off that auto mode, and finally capture the scene exactly the way you see it in your mind's eye? Get out there and start exposing with intention.